Evening, everyone. Gareth Presh, founder of the World Health Innovation here, and I'm joined this evening by Terri Coutee and Dr. Minas Chrysopoulo, and I'm going to call him Dr. C for short. And we're going to talk this evening about breast cancer awareness, patient safety, quality of life, and the importance of shared decision making. Terri, firstly, can you do a short introduction and tell us a little bit about yourself and the amazing work you do?
Oh, thank you, Garrett. This is a wonderful opportunity, really. And, you know, on such an amazing day, today is World Cancer Survivor Day. And so I shout out to all the survivors and all those who treat them today. So really, yeah. I've been an educator all my life, and I just feel so strongly about how education can empower. And I actually was working on an advanced degree when I received my second diagnosis, and doing a lot of research, embracing the whole research process. And during my recovery from my double mastectomy, I started researching breast reconstruction and all the options that were out there. And what I realized and what I ran into during the 7 months prior to my breast reconstruction is that there were issues I was dealing with personally. I was looking for support, finding others who had been through this process, that we had, some commonality that I could talk to. I think accessibility can be a very huge issue for patients. Especially in the setting of autologous reconstruction, which is what I had. It requires microsurgery, it requires specialized skill and training. And so there's the accessibility issue. What questions could and should I ask at my consult? I had no idea. I muddled through all of that by myself. And it was after my reconstruction that it sent me in an entirely different trajectory. I left my, my training, my training to be my master's training in education, and I began writing about my experience. And I think probably that the recognition of Dr. C, noting that we had an alignment in our passion to educate. After beginning my blog and my content, he really encouraged me to open a foundation. And so I did. And DP Foundation is going on its 4th year, and we have continued to grow. What we do at the foundation is reach out to other patients who, like myself, are looking at all options, whether they want to reconstruct or not. There are so many questions they have to ask their surgeons, plastic surgeons, breast surgeons, the process. What if I have to travel for my reconstruction? How do I find a board-certified plastic surgeon? So it's really evolved through the years. And, I think conversation is a beautiful thing. It's what we're doing today. But to me, action is exhilarating. And if I hadn't accepted the call to action from Dr. C to start my foundation, but also to be a part of this wonderful app that he has developed, the Breast Advocate app for all those affected by breast cancer, if I hadn't accepted that invitation to become part of that, to be part of this actionable item to help breast cancer patients, I couldn't be sharing it in my own communities today. And so I really think that the sense of collaboration between patients and surgeons, the healthcare profession, is so powerful. I do feel that it's making changes through conversation, but again, like I said, these actionable items, these tools that we can provide for patients. And I'm not dismissing it. I would be remiss to not mention the fact that patient voices matter too, whether it's in a small way or large. I think we're seeing very valuable changes because we're connecting each other, and we're sharing information with surgeons to improve patient outcomes based on our own lived experience. So, that's what the foundation is doing, and it has reached a global community. I couldn't be happier about it. So
it's amazing work, absolutely fantastic. When we talk about the surgeon and the clinical side, Dr. C, can you give us an insight into your background and your work, and particularly around patient safety and inclusiveness? It's fantastic. You've brought this opportunity for patients to have a voice, but also you value that.
Yeah, well, thanks very much. Terri, just a quick point. You were the impetus behind what you've done, and you've had a lot of great support. Your family's great, but really, it was just a little push on my part. So you take the credit, right? You've done amazing work, and I'm proud to know you, and I'm proud to have seen how the foundation has grown. And really, it's just very exciting to be part of this great team that you've put together too. So kudos to you. And your breast reconstruction is just part of one big conversation. Obviously, my life is in breast cancer. I'm a plastic surgeon. I specialize in microsurgery and specific techniques for breast reconstruction. And breast reconstruction is what introduced me to shared decision-making as a process, which is exactly what you're saying, Gareth. It's the importance of the patient having a voice, because coming through medical school and all our training, most physicians my age and older, really we're used to a paternalistic approach to medicine and decision-making, where the physician knows best. And really, that's very flawed, and quite frankly, it's archaic, and we have to move on. And shared decision-making provides a lot of opportunity, not just in breast reconstruction, not just in breast cancer, not just in cancer, but throughout health specialties. So it's not specialty specific. For breast cancer specifically, 40% of patients don't feel like they've really had a voice in their treatment decision making. And breast reconstruction specifically, 57% don't feel like they make a high quality decision as they define it, right? So in my little bubble of a world, shared decision making is very important, but really it's serving now as the basis of a much bigger conversation, because there's lots of opportunity, I think, here. Shared decision making is really standard of care, but unfortunately it's not standard practice. And so hopefully we can touch on some of the reasons why today. But yeah, it's been really, this is for me, it's been exploring my passion, developing my passion of breast reconstruction, but actually it's now kind of opened up this whole other big arena throughout healthcare, which is really very exciting for me.
I mean, my background has been in public health, health services, should we say, health service design. And when I worked in the National Haemophilia Council, we were part of a very unique body, because it was set up under statutory instrument, but it would involve patients, clinicians, managers, voluntary sector, education, and the business community, or should we say, the wider community within the health sector. And I kind of was a bit naive, because I thought that was how the system worked. Do you know what I mean? And then when I left and I joined the NHS, for example, I soon realized, well, actually, patients don't really have much of a say in shall we say, decisions. And I think this is part of the pioneering work that you're doing, kind of broadening that. And I think these sort of platforms through Facebook and your Facebook groups are so powerful. And I was talking to Terri earlier about, we're going to see such a paradigm shift in healthcare over the next 12, 24, 5, shall we say, months within the health system, particularly after COVID. Because, I mean, I read a report from the WHO the other day, our whole system has been disrupted. in terms of treatment for NCDs, which of course is cancers. And we're going to see that over the next 24 months, where that's going to really hit hard, unfortunately. That's going to mean we're going to have to change our model very rapidly. Can I ask Terri, just give us a little bit of background about the group that you set up, and tell us a little about the global reach and how you interact on a daily basis with the group. That would be really insightful. We have a couple of questions and we'll come to them as well. There's a few people have put some questions in, but if you could just tell us a little bit about the group, that would be fantastic.
Yes, well, it's really part of the social media outreach, and you know, something I knew nothing about, I just dove into, but realized the power of social media. And so we started out very small. I believe it was in 2016, I believe. And so we just started gathering a few patients from really around the US, patients that perhaps I had been in contact with through my own reconstruction and breast cancer diagnoses. And then it started growing, I think, by word of mouth. Well, the connection, not just with patients, but with the medical health community, and it includes surgeons, radiologists, oncoplastic surgeons, tattoo artists, physical therapists, genetic counselors, all of this group of healthcare workers, you know, they really work with cancer patients to provide and to make their outcomes better. So I'm like, I want them to be on this page. So I'm very transparent about that. And I think that it adds a great deal of depth and volume to the group. And they're there to guide us. They're there to answer questions. So going to conferences, going to medical conferences, and talking to the healthcare community then allowed me to start meeting, you know, surgeons from around the globe. And I also think the combination of talking to surgeons around the globe, but also the ripple effect that patient conversation has had. Breast cancer knows no demographic bounds. And so gathering this group of women together and the ripple effect of the discussion between patients and surgeons, I think has just made the group grow into a global organization. So I get on every day, first thing in the morning, if I, you know, barring all unforeseen circumstances, I get on to support these women, to answer their questions or just offer some words of comfort. But we also on there collectively, you know, we provide resources for each other. We connect doctors to patients based on our good experiences. So that's...
I think what you're describing is an invaluable resource to the health service that really isn't recognized and given the support it really deserves. Minas, would you just tell us from your perspective how valuable this sort of network is from a learning perspective, from a patient engagement perspective? Because I'd really love to kind of, like, you know, try and articulate to the audience what rich resources we have out there in abundance that is valuable, that we need to tap into as a society, as a community.
It's crucial, Gareth, actually. It really is. It's a previously undefined, really very important cog in the wheel. Studies have shown that support structures are crucial to getting through all sorts of health issues. And they've looked specifically at cancer as well as part of that. And irrespective of what your support structure looks like and how good it may be, some people unfortunately obviously go through something like cancer diagnosis on their own, but even a patient who feels very well supported and loved at home through family, friends, etc., the support that someone who has gone through exactly what you're going through now, the support that that person can provide, far exceeds anything and any level of understanding that a loved one or a friend who hasn't had that experience can provide. So there's that support structure and an aspect that's really, really key. The other issue really, which, you know, doesn't go down well in terms of, you know, when you discuss this with colleagues, sometimes we get a bit defensive as physicians, but let's face it, right? We talk about things that we're comfortable with. We, as physicians, we're human. We do what we were taught. We practice the ways in ways that make us feel comfortable and confident in our outcomes. And sometimes we're not up to date with the latest and greatest, and sometimes we just don't have the experience. And so the conversation is very much guided by our armamentarium. And, you know, physicians have the power to deliver information in a certain way that guides the patient either consciously or subconsciously. So groups like these online, especially really well, ones that are based on solid collaboration with expertise, evidence-based approaches such as the Deep Sea Foundation, you know, that provides patients with the confidence that they're getting information that's current and from multiple sources. So then they can vet that and take that to their physician teams and have a proper discussion. It's particularly important in the US. We've got the fee-for-service issue also, where that comes into the conversation a lot, because if you don't offer something, you know, are you going to talk about it and potentially lose the patient? I mean, that's not a very PC thing to say, but unfortunately, I think economics comes into the conversation too. So anyway, anything that is based on an evidence-based footing, like Terri's group, and there are several groups out there that really value an evidence-based approach. Really, I think it's invaluable for patients to be exposed to the right information. And I'm also excited now with more open access journals coming into play. That's really crucial too, because there's an appetite for it. Patients want to know about the evidence. A lot of the feedback I've had about the app, you know, Breast Advocate, a lot of patients like having access to the articles that we post in there to back up recommendations. So I think the time where, you know, we as physicians or as healthcare workers, we just presume that patients just want to be told what to do, I think that's over. For physicians or healthcare members of the team who feel that some patients, they just want to be told what to do, I think we're missing the point in terms of what shared decision-making is. Shared decision-making doesn't have to mean that the patient decides the treatment. That's not it at all. It's a collaborative approach between the healthcare workers' expertise, their experience, evidence-based medicine, and the preferences and values of the patient. Now, inherent to that is deciding on the degree of autonomy that the patient wants. But the patient needs to decide how much say they want to have. That in and of itself is a shared decision-making decision, right? So anyway, it's a long-winded answer, but I got to tell you, oftentimes it's groups like these, like Deep Sea, introduce patients to information that they've never had shared with them before.
Yeah. I think this comes down to, you know, I mean, I think you've answered the question there. What is the best way to steer plastic surgeons towards shared decision making? I suppose it's you know, it's kind of that collaborative approach, that there is a benefit for the surgeon as well, which there is, you know, because better outcomes, you know, it's a win-win situation. It's that shared learning, it's that experience from the patient's perspective so that the physician can improve. And then there's that mutual respect, and then it grows. And then, of course, that spreads. We've got a couple of other questions here. Let me go down. Any tools you suggest to help facilitate conversation between clinicians and patients in terms of patients' desires? Terri, maybe you might have an insight, and then Minas from your perspective.
Yeah, well, from my perspective, you know, you brought up the open access, Dr. C. And of course, I always tell patients about the Breast Advocate app. You can go into your, you know, appointment right there with your information loaded. But here's what I would suggest. I did a Instagram live with one of the editors of a free open access plastic surgery journal this week. And what I said on there is, for patients, whether you take it in paper form or whether you take the Breast Advocate app with you, whatever article you're downloading, the thing about breast reconstruction and most breast cancers, not all, I don't want to minimize any diagnosis, but you have time to research. This is not an emergency surgery. You know, you're going into the emergency room and you've got to decide right now. You have time. Take the time, read the articles, underline things you don't understand, drill down to what it is you think that you want to do, which is very easy to do with the Breast Advocate app or in an article that you're reading. Drill down to specifically what you want, absorb the information, try to understand it, but what you don't understand, take to your consult, take to your healthcare team and say, I'm pretty sure this is what I want, but I don't understand this one part of it. Can you help me understand it? Can you talk to me about that?
Terri, that's a really good point. I just want to underline that. Cancer is obviously very emotional. Mm-hmm. The person who's been diagnosed with it, it has to be dealt with yesterday, right? So there's also what we know. We know that from a prognosis standpoint, in terms of how well you as a newly diagnosed patient is going to do, you know, your outcome, how long you'll live. What we know is that if you can somehow just stop for a sec and give yourself the opportunity and a little bit of time to really look at your options, it's not that delay isn't going to make any difference to your outcome. So, you know, there are certain patients, we hear it all the time, we see it all the time in our practice, where patients are told, oh, you've got to get in for your lumpectomy tomorrow, or your mastectomy, it has to be done tomorrow. That's just strictly not true. It's just not. Now, don't take 6 months, okay? But you got a few days. You know, you've got time to really try if you can. And some people are incapable because the emotions, they just can't deal with the emotions. And some folks will just do much better if they compartmentalize their decision making and just deal with what has to be immediately decided and then make things in a stepwise fashion. And that's okay too. If that's you, then great, that's fine. Just work out what works best for you. But for those of you who can give yourself a few days emotionally, you've got time to look at the options, okay? Because if you take the time and you feel part of the conversation in terms of the decision making, you're going to be happier. Your outcome is going to be better. You're going to be more involved with the treatment because, quite frankly, you've got skin in the game. Mm-hmm. And being the patient who has the diagnosis, that's not what I mean by skin in the game. What I mean is skin in the conversation, okay? And so if you feel part of it, then it really is a team approach between you and your healthcare team. Okay, it's not your doctor trying to get you through, it's you're part of it, right? And so it's really, really important, if you can, to just stop, think, try and think it through a little bit and take a little bit of time.
I think this is like such an important piece of advice. And anyone listening to this or is on record, take note of this, not just for cancer, but for every single health condition you have or may have, or a family member may have. It is emotional when someone gives you some bad news within the family or whatever it is. Yes, it is. Take time, 24 hours, 48 hours, it will really hit you. But then step back, get some online publications, reach out to your professionals, ask for advice, join some patient groups, start learning as quickly as you possibly can, and seek as much advice and soak that up as much as you possibly can. Because I think, as you say, the literature, the results, the outcomes, if you are comfortable, or even if it's a family member, we all have that experience where members of our family, unfortunately, have had some form of cancer. And I think it's really important that we support each other as well. I think one of the things I would like to ask both is, which is such a challenge, people are diagnosed with cancer every single day of the week. And when people hear they're diagnosed with cancer, the community just kind of steps back from them. There's like a stigma there, like it's not talked about in our life, and one of the things I would really like to do, from our perspective, is challenge that, and say that's just lack of information, because when people are diagnosed, for example, children's cancer or whatever it is, people automatically assume, well, they're gonna die, That's not true, and one of the most important things for people in those positions is support and help, and that could be simply a coffee, a cup of tea with someone. Just say, look, can I meet you? And that's absolutely crucial. I'd really like to know what you think, Terri and Minas. How do we break that stigma? I don't think we talk enough about cancer. We've all these massive events around the world. Let's beat cancer, let's break cancer. But I don't think many people who turn up to them and they give a lot of money, they donate to cancer research, the whole lot, but they don't understand what cancer is. They've no concept of what that actually means until it hits the family. Mm-hmm. Terri?
You bring up such a good point. I think in my community, what I've seen happen, I almost have an analogy of a sphere. And the sphere is, this group of people who have been affected by cancer. And by affected, I mean the patient, the caregiver, the healthcare, providers. And so we all form this sphere and this community. And so how do we inform others about that? Throw it out there almost like a pebble on the water, and let those ripples spread, and know it's okay to talk about this. It's okay to ask any question and to feel any emotion you're feeling, but then get the gift of education to empower yourself so that you can move forward and make a decision. Take that break that Dr. C was talking about. Take a breath, take a moment, and gather the information you need, because it really is going to be life-changing. You can't get stuck in the emotional part of the diagnosis. At some point, you have to move beyond it. And from my perspective, as a lifelong educator, you do that through education, educating yourself from all these outside entities.
Dr. C, from your perspective?
Yeah, I think this again, a lot of this falls on the patient, right? So I don't think we can blame others who treat you in a taboo way. How do you know that they know that you've had the diagnosis, that you've been diagnosed? I mean, there's a lot of, you can't presume. But at the same time, how does someone who's just been diagnosed with cancer ask and delegate help? How do you do that?
Mm-hmm.
So I think we've got to get down to specifics. And I mean, you asking that question, it was a bit of a bolt, actually. Quite frankly, I thought, oh man, it's another little section I've got to include in the Breast Advocate app. You know, how to ask for help, because it's easier said than done, right? I mean, it's easy to say, oh, go on online groups and everything. So now you got to go in, you got to look, you got to feel your way. You don't know what to say. People, when they've got all this going through their minds, a ton of information, they don't know which decision to make first. They need specific instructions how to go about things. So maybe we need to do a better job of telling our patients or recommending how to go about asking for help.
It's just fear. Like I genuinely feel like I can speak from a little bit of experience, and you know, working in the hospital sector for many years, and when you deal with patients in these situations, you know, there's so much fear, but there's also the fear of asking a question and feeling, well, am I silly, like, for asking that question, you know, that kind of way. And but there's no silly questions, you know. You should just ask the questions, like, and so anyone watching this, you know, really encourage you to ask questions, particularly around, you know, medical issues. You know, don't be afraid to ask a question, you know. Just ask the question. And then also don't be afraid to reach out, you know, as well. And, you know, that's part of the reason the work we do, with the three of us do, you know, is to help others. Like, that's the purpose of what we're here to do. We're here to help people. We're here to share knowledge. We're here to improve the outcomes of people's health and well-being. That's the job. We do that successfully, then we all live well. I just want to talk a little bit about solutions. You're talking about the app. Let's talk a little bit about the future. Let's talk about, what do you see coming in the next 5 years from the point of view of digital technology? How can that help? How can the app help? You know, to improve outcomes. We're also going to see a disruption in surgery, which is going to happen. You know, this is, we've seen this with COVID, and how are we going to deal with all this in the next, shall we say, couple of years? Maybe Dr. C, you could start on this one and give us an insight, what you see in the next 5 years.
Yeah, well, I think, again, you know, if patients change care, right? Patients change care more than doctors change care. People are status quo. We're all status quo for the most part. Like I mentioned earlier, practices really don't change rapidly. People do what they're used to doing, what they're comfortable doing. So patient empowerment is key, and there's going to be even more pressure to change because of economic reasons, resources. You know, we're already stretched in terms of resources. You look at the population, the aging, look at availability of, you know, medical staffing, physicians, all the rest of it. You know, there are loads of issues we're going to have. And so, you know, if patients think they don't have enough time with their doctors now, just wait.
Yeah.
And so I think, you know, Breast Advocate is really much just the beginning, and that's just it's the first foray. And I think I'm particularly excited about it because I'm really excited and open, and I would love to encourage dialogue, exchange of ideas. Breast Advocate for me is just the beginning of a way that we can use that as the starting point and apply it to any other disease, any other shared decision-making process, quite frankly. It doesn't even have to be just in healthcare, to be honest, right? It's just, that's where my niche is. That's where, you know, that's what I'm passionate about. But I think anything that maximizes information exchange in the most timely way, and it remains evidence driven. If we stay true to those three things, I think it will be a really good starting point, really, to face the issues we have coming. That's my focus. I mean, what other avenues do you foresee, Gareth, in terms of being? What would you add to that list?
I mean, from my perspective, the challenges that you talked about, and I was going to kind of lead into this, and we're going to face 18 million staff shortfall by 2030. Yeah. Okay, this year is the year of the nurse. We're 9 million short in terms of nurse manpower going forward. Yeah. I mean, people need to understand the challenges are quite significant. For the last 12 weeks from COVID, we've delayed almost 28 million surgeries. Okay, globally. So just put that into context, and Minas, unfortunately, that will lead to untimely deaths. So we'll have a knock-on effect to the system. There's just been a recent survey, 100 countries, about 60-70% of NCDs, which is cancers and diabetes, that has been delayed. We face over 50 million deaths per year. So the knock-on effect to this, what we've just experienced in the next 12 to 24 months, I was talking to Terri about this, is going to be significant. Mm-hmm. Now, we have a choice to change the course here. We can begin to use our knowledge, use these forums and scale them up, use our collective wisdom and start engaging with the public in these forums head on, straight into where these large groups are, and saying, how do we work with you? How can we promote prevention? How can we promote awareness? How can we share that knowledge? And the medical profession have a choice. They can either join that or they will get left behind, because we're going to see such a need for information. It's going to be vast. I think this is where the Sustainable Development Goals will have a very key focus. SDG 3, which is good health and well-being. From our perspective, from Terri and yourself, we have an opportunity with the breast app, and we've talked about this already, of putting this in the project pipeline to support the SDGs. So that's one of the projects we're definitely going to do. That's in the pipeline. It's a given. And I'm not really worried, should we say, about because these challenges, we will rise to the occasion. That's my belief. Is we have the knowledge, we have the people, we also have the financing. I think people need to understand financial restraints and how the financial system works. And it's all about generating value, so you can raise investment once you have value created. In the health system, when you talk about intellectual capital, you talk about the opportunity for a circular economy, you have a $12 trillion market space there. Okay. We can tap into that and then create a circular economy model off the back of that. That's part of our job. And we can do that. It all depends on the leadership, depends on who takes the move and who wants to do it. So that's a little bit, I think robotics will come into it. I think you're going to see a big jump towards digital technology, because people will reach out, they want that information. But the most important thing with that information is it's got to be secure. We've got to look out for cyber technology and cyber attacks. And who are we giving this information to? I think this is absolutely crucial as well. The information that is gathered from patient data and so on and so forth, we need to make sure that that is used appropriately and that it's not used, for financial gain. The data being sold, it shouldn't happen like that. We've got to make sure we protect this and it's used appropriately. Terri, from your perspective, what do you see the future over the next couple of years? I mean, you've already given us a demonstration of how you started a group in 2016 and now 2020, it's just grown globally. So I'm going to be really excited to see how it goes for you in the next couple of years.
Yeah, I was telling you earlier, Gareth, that I had no idea the amount of growth that it would see. So it is very exciting. And when I think I maybe perhaps have reached a plateau, it goes to the next level. But it's because, patients keep seeking the information. A couple of things that I would really like to point out and hope that things really develop and change. And part of the reason that I started the foundation is accessibility and to really, narrow the health disparity issue. I think that there are patients who are in rural communities or in more remote communities that don't have the access to a larger facility or a larger hospital in a larger city. And so I think that's something that we should focus on. I don't think, for a minute that these changes that we've seen with COVID and our ability to reach a broader audience through, platforms like this, through the Breast Advocate app and through communities, I think it's going to help one patient at a time. I always say if we help one patient at a time, it will help with all of that. But I also think too that it's very important for us sometimes to give patients the actual vocabulary. What are the words that they need to use to go into a shared decision-making conversation? Sometimes they just don't know what they are. They might know what they want to ask. They might know what's, they're noodling in their head about, what they're concerned about, but it's the words, that we need to actually share with them. And, to be able to let them know how to communicate that with their healthcare professionals so that they can feel a part of the decision-making.
Yeah, I think this is quite an interesting one, and we're coming to the end, and I'm going to ask you for your final thoughts now in a second. But one of the most important things, and this could be something for the app actually, and for the group as well, Terri, is it's actually how do you navigate the system? So one of the things that people need to understand is, and I see this a lot in healthcare, people don't seem to understand how do you navigate a system, and that goes from the moment you walk into A&E. Or if you're carried into A or whatever, or you go to your clinical secretary, how can you manage and successfully manage that navigation through the system? And how you do that will have a profound effect on your outcome. And what I mean by that is it depends on your attitude towards the staff and towards, even getting there will have a profound effect. So maybe that's something for a conversation later that we could pick up on and something we could work on. But last word to yourself, Dr. C, and then Terri, and what can we, give us a bit of an insight into what you feel will happen over the next few years and your aspirations, your vision, because we want to be on that journey with you.
Yeah, I really want to make shared decision making. I think is a key opportunity. It checks. There are no downsides really when you look at it. Right, checks a ton of boxes. Lots of research opportunities there. We've got increasing outcomes data in various specialties. I'm particularly keen on looking at maybe some cost savings data there in association with shared decision making. Not much published on that, other than perhaps educated patients often choose less invasive options, and less invasive options have fewer complications many times, and there's some cost savings there. But anyway, I think I'd be particularly keen. Actually, and Gareth, this is a conversation that I really want to have with you. When you look at shared decision making, less than 10% of outpatient visits really meet the criteria for shared decision making. That's based on an article published in JAMA. And if you don't have health systems embracing it, then we're making it harder for our patients. So one thing I would love to see is, when you talk about collaboration, the three of us can collaborate all day long. But how do we get the private sector, like tech, digital, health companies, how to get them more involved with NHS, for example, to help them achieve all this, right? Because in terms of navigating a system, there are a ton of different systems out there. So how do we engage with that specific system to identify issues within their system and help them address them together? That would be a lovely model to pursue. I'd be very keen on pursuing that rather than just presuming and trying to work things out. Tell us the exact issues that you have. And quite often, you know, Gareth, I think most of the time, those own systems won't even know where the barriers are.
Yeah, it's totally true. I think, you know, some of the, firstly, I mean, the only way systems will change is if they admit there's a problem. So first and foremost, you have to put your hand up and say, we have a problem here. And I think that's going to have to come. So unless the system is ready to do that, it unfortunately won't change in time. What I think will possibly happen is that the private sector will likely drive it forward, probably through the SDGs, probably through NGOs, probably through the voluntary sector. And I also think that there's a great opportunity to create value. So it comes down to the bottom line, you know, what's the dollar here like? But there is a dollar here, but it's a dollar that's positive, if you know what I mean. So you'll see new systems can emerge, you know, in terms of prevention, you know, so we can demonstrate the dollar value. Your shared decision making, we can demonstrate the value there easily within, you know, there's methodologies. I'm really looking forward to working with you on this in terms of how we structure it, how we demonstrate that value. That's like, you know, for example, we'll be able to show, you know, blood transfusions are down. You know, these are all costs, you know what I mean? So we can begin to build that. And then you can reinvest that money back into preventative measures. Again, it all comes down to the reasons why we said a few minutes ago, when you're short of 18 million staff and you have an increase in population, you know, the current system is going to be overwhelmed. So we have to centralize those systems in order to get better outcomes, and then reinvest the money back into a value chain in the community. That's where the opportunity is. Terri, from your perspective, final word?
You know, I listened to what you said a minute ago. Sometimes we just don't know where the problems exist. I invite the listeners, your communities today, both Dr. C and Gareth, invite the patient voice. Improving patient outcomes can only happen when we listen to the patient voice. Invite us to the table, listen to our stories. But I also want to talk to patients and to patient advocates. Let's do it in a responsible manner. Let's do it in an evidence-based manner, and with responsibility, putting our emotional patient stories in it, but also, you know, engaging with the healthcare community so that in a collaborative method, in a collaborative discussion, you know, then we can take those exhilarating actions, change policy, change things for patients so that outcomes improve. So.
Absolutely. This has been a fantastic WHISTalks. I don't really want it to end, to be honest with you, but I'm sure we can do another one in the next couple of weeks. Just finally, from both of you, how do people get in touch with yourselves? Dr. C, from your perspective, how can people reach you?
I'm on Facebook, Dr. Chrysopoulo. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter. Pick any of those three. You can, what else? Email me. We can post stuff, right? We can post.
Sure, we'll put links in the, and I've put them along the bottom there. It's on so the people can get.
I'm really easy to get in touch with.
Super.
It drives my wife.
That could be problematic. Terri?
I'm on all social media platforms too, and I just want to say that Deep C Foundation, DEEP is the procedure that I have, but I advocate for all options of breast reconstruction. DIEP. C is the first initial of my last name, so Deep C Foundation. YouTube is growing in strength, our YouTube channel. Twitter, I'm at 6 State because that's the teaching certificates I had in 6 states, and I just kept that handle. But the rest is Deep Sea Foundation, the website, Facebook. Reach out. I would be happy to hear from you and see what we can do to help.
Excellent. Listen, both, I'm really grateful for your time this afternoon. It's been just a fantastic talk. I really look forward to working with you over the next couple of years as we build momentum, as we get, shared decision up on the agenda, patient safety, improve quality of life, and get people discussing breast cancer and cancer in general and break the stigma. So we've got a lot of work to do, particularly around sustainable development goals. So thank you very much. Thanks everyone for joining. Next week, we have Jean-Guy de Gabrac, who's going to talk about World Wellness Weekend. So I'm looking forward to inviting him onto the call or onto the discussion. So from us, from myself, Terry, and Dr. C, thank you very much and good evening. Good night. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Gareth.